Thank you for staying with me for part 2. From other scripture, we know that the daily sacrifice will be taken away when there are 1,290 days remaining, meaning remaining until Yahshua comes, which means the daily sacrifice must be started sometime between day 2,300, meaning the very first day of Daniel's vision, up until day 1,290. And it's easier if we look at a chart. So I'm just going to show you what I'm talking about. When we're looking at charts, we always are the eschatology charts, or at least my charts. We're looking at the very last day here. The very last day. We know that there's 2,520 days, this whole time period, for a 7-year period. And within that time frame, we see 2,300 days. And those began 220 days into the last 7 years. They're going to end on the same day. And within that time frame, the very last 1,290 days, we see certain events happening. The sacrifice is being abolished. And that means the sacrificing had to have begun in order for it to be abolished at day 1290. Now, here's the scripture in Daniel 12:11 that proves what we're saying. It says, from the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. So we need to add something to our little layout. Here we see the 1,290 days where the sacrifice is abolished. But we also see at that time that the abomination of desolation is set up. So at that point, there's only 1,290 days remaining. From other scripture, we know the saints are handed over to Antichrist for 1,260 days. These saints are handed over to Antichrist until the Ancient of Days comes, meaning they end when Yahshua comes back. And here's some scripture. Daniel 7, chapter 7, verses 21 through 22 says, as I watched, this horn, meaning the Antichrist, was waging war against the saints and defeating them, until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the saints and of the Most High, and the time came when they possessed the kingdom. So here we see the 2,520 days, meaning a 7-year period. And just a note of interest, if you divide that in two, you'll see 1,260 days and 1,260 days. It's a 7-year period. Now, day 1,290, we see that the sacrifice, which had to have already been going on, is abolished. It's taken away, and the abomination of desolation is set up. Now, when there's only 1,260 days left, the saints are handed over to the Antichrist. The host is trampled underfoot. Notice that there is a 30-day window between the day that the sacrificing is abolished and the abomination is set up, abomination of desolation is set up, and the saints being handed over to Antichrist. There's a 30-day window. This is a very important window. I urge you to study this. It's very important. Now, but why are the saints handed over for 1,260 days? They're handed over because of rebellion. In Daniel chapter 8, verses 12, we read, because of rebellion, the host of the saints and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. We already know from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, there will be 1,290 days left, meaning at day 1,290, the daily sacrifice is taken away. The abomination of desolation is also set up at this time. There are 30 days between the events of the daily sacrifice being taken away, the abomination of desolation being set up, and the saints being handed over for the remaining 1,260 days that end with the Ancient of Days coming. So again, and that was just a repeat of what we had already gone over. So here again we see the last 7 years, and within a 2,300 day period from Daniel's vision, we see at day 1,290, counting from the day that Yahshua would return backwards. We have, when there's 1290 days left, we see the sacrificing being abolished, the abomination of desolation being set up. 30 days after that, when there's only 1,260 days remaining, we see the saints handed over, or the host handed over to the Antichrist to be trampled. Since day 1,290, we'll see the daily sacrifice taken away and the abomination of desolation being set up. This means the temple is brought low on day 1,290. That's just looking at this little chart again as we go through. Okay, of the 4 events pertaining to Daniel's vision, which lasts 2,300 mornings and evenings, and those events were the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, the surrender of the sanctuary, and the host being trampled underfoot. There are only 2 events related in Daniel's vision that can start from the very first day of the 2,300 mornings and evenings. The other events have very specific appointed times to start. Either one or both of the remaining events must begin on the very first day of the 2,300 mornings and evenings vision. Those events are either the Great Rebellion must start on the first day of the 2,300 days, or the daily sacrificing must begin, meaning the actual sacrificing, not the abolishing of it, must begin on the very first day of the 2,300 mornings and evenings vision. Now, they both could start on that day. We don't really know which one, but these definitely happen in the beginning, before the 1290 days, and one of them, if not both of them, must begin on that first day of the 2,300 mornings and evenings. Now, what does this mean to you as a believer? Well, it means many things. Many, many things. I really urge you to study this. It will be a huge blessing to you, and you'll be very glad you did, should you live to the very last days. But for this video, it means if you see a covenant confirmed for a 7-year period, start counting. If you get to day 220, meaning 220 days into that 7-year period, which would bring you to the 2,300 days, and there is no sacrifice being practiced, and the Great Rebellion has not started, then this is not the 7-year covenant. And the last 7 of Daniel's 77s has not started. Let's just look at this again. Here we see the 7-year period, the 2,520 days. A date when there's only 1,290 days remaining. The sacrificing, which should already be being practiced, would be abolished. The abomination of desolation will be set up at that point. 30 days after that, we see the saints being handed over to the Antichrist. I urge you to study Daniel and to ponder the 2,300 evenings and mornings, as well as the 1,260 days, the 1,290 days, and the 1,335 days. There is much, much more to this study. Much more. And again, I urge you to study it. You will be so blessed. I know I have been. And again, it will be hugely important to you. Should you live, should you survive to this time period that we're discussing. For now, may you be greatly blessed. Thank you for joining me, and stay tuned. Pray for me, and I will pray for you. God bless.